Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing the love chat explained, when to contact your ex. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Check out my socials for extra content. The links are in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing the love chat explained, when to contact your ex. So if you have gone through a breakup and want to try to get your ex back, it can be confusing whether or not you should be in no contact or reach out to your ex. When should you have the love chat? In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 situations where I believe you should reach out to your ex and whether or not you should say that you love them in this contact. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is when you're the dumper. So if you're a dumpy, please keep listening through today's podcast because I'll be getting to your point of view very, very shortly. But first of all, we need to speak about if you're the dumper. And this is because if you are the dumper and you've decided you've made a huge error of judgment and you want your ex back, well, you need to be the person to contact your ex. If you don't contact your ex, you can't be expecting them to reconnect with you because you've broken their heart. Now consider the situation. You came to the decision that you wanted to end the relationship. You lost romantic emotional attraction, but as you are now feeling more attraction growing, more intrigue, more wonder, you want to try and reconnect. This is therefore a change in your mindset. You are the one who needs to showcase this change. Your ex-dumpy has probably not changed their viewpoint. They likely didn't want the relationship to end, and they likely would consider reconnecting with you. But it's not down to them to make that move. It's down to you because your mindset has changed. Your position has changed, and therefore you need to reach out to your dumpy. Now, how do you do this? Well, it depends on your unique circumstances, but as this is a podcast, I have to speak generally. And if you would like more specific, unique advice, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service where me and you can speak one-on-one. But in a generalized sense, I would suggest that as a dumper, you reach out to your dumpy via a messaging app. It could be a text, it could be whatever it may be, but do it via a message. Now, the reason for this is because it adds less pressure to your dumpy and also less pressure to yourself. If and when you send this text, your ex-dumpy can read it at their own leisure, consider what they want to say, and respond if and when they want to. Again, there is no awkwardness between you or your dumpy during this time because you're not face-to-face and you're not speaking on the phone. Now, this is generalized advice. Maybe your specifics would actually benefit from a face-to-face situation or maybe on the phone. But generally, most of you listening dumpers, I would suggest that you send a text. It's a lot less pressure, and if and when your dumpy wants to respond, they will. Now, the big question is, should you be saying to your ex-dumpy that you love them? Well, I would suggest that you can if you feel that you can say this in a way which is not going to cause awkwardness. If you can present your viewpoints on how you're feeling right now and include the fact that you love your dumpy, then yes, you do have the scope to do this, and it could possibly help you reconnect because your dumpy is probably thinking you don't love them anymore. So it could be very useful, perhaps, for you to mention this in the text message. Now again, this is your unique situation, and I don't know the specifics, but I would say in a general sense, you want to explain how you're feeling, you want to explain your position, you want to say that you're sorry, apologise for the heartbreak, apologise for what you've done, and say why you made that decision and why you've changed your mind. And then, if it feels appropriate, towards the bottom of the text, you could be saying in your own words that you love your dumpy, that you still love your dumpy. I do think that the love chat within this context is possible and it could help you. Now, most dumpers who don't listen to my content won't send out a message which is as clear as this. And dumpies receiving contact from a dumper are probably unlikely to receive the clear context that I'm suggesting dumpers provide because sadly, not all dumpers listen to my suggestions, and therefore, as a dumpee, you might receive content from your ex, which is very, very confusing. You might receive a message saying something along the lines of, hey, have you seen your favourite movies on next week? Or something which is a very much an direct approach. Indirect in what it's actually saying, but directly to you. So as a dumpee, you might not receive what I'm suggesting, but if you are listening, dumpers, you need to make sure that you are clear and concise. This can really help you, because sadly, so many people don't get back together, not because there is no love, but because there is confusion, misinterpretation, and ultimately a misunderstanding between dumper and dumpee. So be clear, be concise, apologise, explain your position right now, say that you love your dumpee if you feel that it is appropriate towards the end of a text, and this will give you that best possible chance of one day reconnecting with your ex. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube, and subscribe to the channel. And point number 2 is if you decide it was wrong to ignore your ex. Now in this instance, we're speaking to dumpees. So if you're a dumpee, please keep listening through. If you're a dumpee, you may receive contact from your ex, and you might decide that you don't want to respond to them. You might think, no, they don't deserve a response. They don't deserve my reply. Their message to me was very basic. It didn't make much sense, and they have not put in enough effort. Maybe your ex-dumper has reached out to you in a way which was not how I just described, and instead it was something which was fairly vague and confusing. And therefore, as a dumpee, you might think, well, I'm not going to respond to this. However, you may regret that decision later down the line, and this is because most dumpers will stop reaching out at a certain point. Some dumpers will only reach out the once, and therefore, if you're a dumpee and you do want your ex back, can you really afford to keep ignoring your ex? I would suggest not. It's my belief that if you want to try to get your ex back as a dumpee and you receive contact from your dumper, you should respond. I'm not saying you respond instantly. I'm not saying you respond within 10 seconds. But what I am saying is that you respond to your ex-dumper, because if you don't, can you really expect to get them back? How much are you going to punish them? How long are you going to wait? How many texts do they need to send you before you respond and try to get back together? If you're a dumpee and you want your ex back, you need to reply. You can't wait around, because they might never contact you again. And this is where point number 2 comes into play. If you're a dumpee and you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, yes, I've actually done that. I received contact from my dumper and I decided to not reply. I decided to ignore them. I decided to wait until I heard something much better, much clearer from them. However, it's now been a few weeks and I've heard nothing more. What should I do? Well, I would suggest dumpees, and again, I do have to give this context, but we have to remember that this is a generalised piece of advice. I don't know your specifics, but dumpees, if you've received contact from your dumper and you do want to get back together, but you thought, I'm not going to reply yet because I want more, and it's been a few weeks, if not months, then maybe you do have the scope to reach out to your dumper. Now, this won't be the case for everyone, but as a dumpee, if you want your ex back and they've reached out to you and you've ignored them and it's been a significant period of time, you have to understand they might never contact you again, and therefore you might have a scope to reach out to them. Now, what exactly you put would depend, obviously, on what they sent you initially that you ignored. But something I would suggest is that you don't tell your ex-dumper that you love them. So in point number 1, I would suggest that your dumper perhaps tells you that they still love you. However, if you're the dumpee, I do not suggest you respond in a text via the love chat and say, hey, I love you. I don't suggest you do that. I don't suggest that you reach out to your dumper via some type of love chat mentality of saying, hey, I love you. I don't suggest you do this, dumpees. Your ex-dumper should not be hearing that type of thing, because it will make them feel that they still have the power within this dynamic and they have dumped you, and now we don't want them feeling that you are begging them to get back in a relationship. So no, I'm not suggesting, dumpees, that you tell your ex that you love them. What I am suggesting is that you reach out and try and begin a conversation, growing it, to see where it goes and how it develops. Now, we don't know for certain what direction this would go from this point, and you have to understand, dumpees, that your ex-dumper might not reply to you. If you've waited 3 months and then you reach out to your dumper because you ignored them previously, they might not reply. We can't say for certain, but what I can say is that you do have the option of doing so If it's been a long time, maybe if it's been only a small amount of time, maybe your ex-dumper reached out a week ago and you ignored them, perhaps that is even a better opportunity for you to respond to that message. Yes, it's late, but better late than never, and see where we can grow this, because ultimately if you want your ex back, that is all that matters, that's all that counts. You want them back, so why push them further away? Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Talking about your feelings can also improve your mental health. It helps prevent the buildup of negative emotions, which can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. Speak your heart to free your mind. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about the love chat explained when to contact your ex. And point number 3 is potentially on special occasions. Now, when I'm saying special occasions, I'm talking about birthdays, Christmas, New Year, something significant on you and your ex's calendar. But when I say potentially, it's because not all dumpies should be reaching out to their ex in this regard. However, some of you do have that opportunity where it makes sense. And I would suggest this is if you and your ex have had a positive interaction within the last month or so, but unfortunately you haven't yet got back together, but it was positive, and it was an interaction which was somewhat instigated by your ex-dumper, and therefore, if their birthday, if Christmas, if New Year, if whatever it is, lands within a month or so of that interaction, I think you have the scope, dumpies, to reach out and wish them happy birthday, etc., whatever it may be, because if you don't, it might look kind of weird. You've had a positive interaction, so why would you ignore their birthday a week later? Now, I'm not suggesting that you do this in all instances, so please remember what I'm saying here. First of all, ask yourself, is this within a month or so? If you had a positive interaction, it was 6 months ago, but nothing since. But unfortunately, I don't suggest you reach out to your ex-dumper. No, it's got to be 3 or 4 weeks maximum. That is something which is reasonable and understandable, and not something which is going to showcase yourself as somebody who is chasing your ex. No, you're not chasing them. You're just being respectable. You're just acknowledging the fact you've had a positive interaction very recently, and you're being a responsible, reasonable human being. That is why you're reaching out if it's a few weeks. If it's more than that, and you've heard nothing more, no, I don't think you need to. I don't think you should, and I don't think it would help you to do so. Secondly, we need to consider the interaction. How was it? Why was it instigated? If you, as a dumpy, reached out to your ex-dumper 3 weeks ago for no particular reason, and they responded in a somewhat positive way, and you think, well, should I now say happy birthday? No, I don't think you should, because you instigated that conversation initially. Maybe they were polite and respectful, but it doesn't mean they were particularly interested in what you had to say regarding reconnection. So you have to consider who reached out to who. If your ex-dumper reached out to you, okay, you've not got back together yet, but they've shown interest. And that is why you can now reach out to them on their birthday or those other days on the calendar. If you bumped into each other, well, that's 50-50. That's fine as well. All I'm saying is, please don't think that just because you've reached out for no reason a few weeks ago, and your ex-dumper was polite enough to say, hi, I'm doing well, thanks, hope you're okay, that does not give you the scope, in my opinion, to say happy birthday. It's got to be instigated by your dumper, or at least a 50-50 situation. It can't just be you chasing them being polite, and then you thinking to yourself, right, I'm going to reach out again a few weeks later. No, that, unfortunately, is not going to help you. So please consider if it's within the time frame and how the interaction took place, making sure, of course, that it was positive. If it was negative, if there was arguing, if there was a weird atmosphere between you, if it was awkward, then no, of course, you shouldn't be reaching out on those situations either. Now, should you, when it's their birthday or an important day of year, should you be saying, I love you? What is the love chat but we need to consider during this situation? Well, in my opinion, as a dumpy, again, you shouldn't be telling your ex that you love them. No, you shouldn't. I'm sure they realise that you do. I'm sure they realise that you didn't want the relationship to end. You don't need to be telling your ex-dumper that you love them most of the time. Again, your unique circumstances may suggest a slight tweak on that, But by and large, most of you, as dumpies, do not need to tell your ex-dumper that you love them. Don't give them any more power than they already feel that they have, but you might have opportunity to reach out and say Happy New Year if the circumstances align. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.